Okay, let's install some plugins. Hello, I'm Michael with WriterSanctuary, and we're continuing building our new blog by installing some plugins that I plan on using. Now, essentially, plugins are like the bread and butter of WordPress. They offer all kinds of different functions and features that you can use yourself in the back end or present to your visitors. For example, you can use a plugin to integrate a feed from Instagram to show your pictures from that website. Or you can include a Twitter feed, Facebook feed. You can add a recipe book. If there's something that you need for your website, there's probably a plugin for it. But today I'm just looking at the first 7 plugins to get my site started. But before we do that, let's go over how to install a plugin in the first place. Now when you install plugins, you go over to the left-hand admin panel of WordPress, hover over plugins, and click on Add New. Then from here, we would just search whatever plugin we want. On the first screen that you come to, WordPress will offer some of its featured plugins, such as the classic editor. Some of the most popular ones that you could possibly install are going to be on this front page here. And a lot of them are, they do have their use depending on what you want to do. Like BuddyPress will help you build a Facebook type website for social media, which I was debating on adding to WriterSanctuary at some point. Classic widgets, the classic editor if you want to revert WordPress back to what it was before version 5. Or you can go and take a look at the popular list. From here we have WooCommerce, Wordfence, Yoast SEO. See, I've already got these installed. Elementor, which is a great website builder. There's quite a few that you can choose from that have quite a few abilities here. Well, let's say that we want something in specific. So let's say I want to add recipe cards. Oops. There. From here, we can install recipe card blocks, recipe card maker. Let's say we want to install recipe card maker. So all we'd have to do now is hit the install now button and then activate the plugin for use. Depending on the plugin that you install, the next screen after activating might be its settings. Otherwise, it'll just show the list of plugins you have installed and you can set it up yourself. Though I do need to stress that it's probably a good idea to read some of the documentation of the plugins so that way you know how to use them. A lot of questions can be solved if you just read the documentation of the plugin developer. But let's say that I want to remove a plugin. Obviously, I'm not going to use recipes on this website because it's all about YouTube. So, where to go? I'm looking for the recipe maker right there. We just click on deactivate. Scroll back down to it and hit delete. And okay. It's gone. You can also disable and remove plugins in bulk by clicking on the checkbox here, which will select them all. Then use bulk actions and say we want to deactivate everything at once. If I hit apply now, it shuts off all of the plugins, which is kind of useful if you plan on doing some troubleshooting in case something goes wrong. If you install plugins, sometimes they don't play well together. And if you don't know which plugin it was, then you have to troubleshoot by disabling them all and then re-enabling them one by one until you come to the one that's broke. It's kind of a pain in the ass, but it's the easiest way to fix a lot of problems with plugins. And don't forget that if you use Green Geeks, in the first video I showed you how to disable all your plugins from the Green Geeks dashboard. So if something does happen with your plugins and you're not able to access WordPress in the back end, you'd go to your Green Geeks dashboard and disable the plugins from there. So what are my top 7 plugins that I'm using right now for this website? Well, the first thing you want to focus on is getting security. Even though WordPress is a fairly stable system, never underestimate the criminal element. Bots and hackers don't care if your site's popular or not, they just want to take advantage of it. In this instance, I installed Wordfence and I've been using Wordfence for quite some time. Now you have to sign up with a free license from their website unless you plan on upgrading, which is probably a good idea. But since we're using everything on the free this time around, I'm just going with the free protection, and it works great to block things like brute force attacks, and it scans your files for any kind of changes. I'm a big fan of Wordfence. But even if you don't use Wordfence, find a security plugin that's right for you and make sure it's one of the first things you install. My second plugin is Yoast SEO. I've been using Yoast for a very long time. In fact, I started using Yoast when I was writing at my prime for clients on TextBroker so that I can write better content for them while providing search engine optimization within the text. And thanks to Yoast, I had far fewer revision requests on TextBroker. Ever since then, it's always been my go-to. But you don't need to stick with Yoast. There's plenty of them out there, like All-in-One SEO is a good one. Rank Math is another. I like the SEO tools that has everything built in. So like the sitemap that you share with Google, it scans through the text to make sure that your writing is readable to a certain grade level. And recently they combined with Wincher so you can get ideas for other words to use within your article based on your keyword. But never underestimate the value of SEO writing tools. The third thing I installed was Google Sitekit. Now, Google Sitekit is very handy. It connects your website to things like Search Console, Google Analytics, AdSense. So it brings all that information directly into WordPress so you don't have to go to a third-party site to look it up. The only problem though is that Sitekit isn't nearly as intuitive as going through Search Console or through Analytics itself. Think of Sitekit as more like a preliminary view of how your website's doing in search. Now it will show you like the top 10 search phrases people use to find your content, but if you want to dive deeper into the data, you definitely want to use Search Console instead. I tell you what, when I installed Sitekit this time around, it was a hell of a lot easier setting up Search Console and Google Analytics directly from WordPress. See, before you had to go through the back end of everything and then sign up your website, submit your sitemap and all that. You still have to submit your sitemap, which is why I like Yoast, because you get one. But it was really handy being able to connect all of my services without actually having to log into them. So Sitekit has come a long way since I first started using it years ago. The fourth thing I install is more of a maintenance SEO type of plugin. It's Broken Link Checker. Now what Broken Link Checker does is it scans through your content, always trying to find any kind of URL that is broken. This includes anything you're linking out to, your internal links, or even broken images. As you can see from the picture right here, that I've got quite a few broken images on WriterSanctuary. That's because it scanned some of the posts I wrote back in 2014, 2013, and those images are long gone, so I have some cleaning to do. But the reason why you'd want to do this is because Google hates broken links. Think of it this way, every link to a piece of content you create is kind of like a vote to the Google search algorithm. The more votes a certain article has, the more popular Google thinks it is, and the more prominent it'll appear in search. This is why creating backlink strategies is still quite popular in blogging world. But with Broken Link Checker, any of those broken links, it'll pop it up. You can either replace it, delete the link, go in and edit the article directly, or sometimes it gives you a false positive and you have to verify that the link is still actually working. That's because of the way that Broken Link Checker scans through the links. Some website firewalls will trigger and it'll say that the link is broken even though it really isn't. So you just right click, check the link, make sure it's working, and if it does, Broken Link Checker is aware of this and has an option to where you can set it as not broken. That's all you have to do. But anyway, it's a handy tool to make sure that all of your images and links still work. The fifth thing I add is WP Discuss. This is because I love engaging with my audience, whether it's on a blog or YouTube. I like WP Discuss because it has a lot of options that are kind of fun for anybody who comes to the website, and it does a fairly good job of helping me keep everything clean. Plus, it comes with its own optimization settings so that you can keep your list of comments kind of short, because the more stuff that has to load, the longer your page takes to load. So if you have everything collapsed and easily organized that people are going to expand if they want to continue reading, it helps with the performance of your pages. And I just like the overall look of it. Next up isn't necessarily a necessity, but it's one that I prefer to use over the WordPress built-in, and that's Starbox. Now, Starbox is an author bio platform that lets you show off who you are and your social links to other sites. Plus, it has an option tab that you can click on that shows all the articles recently that you wrote, or at least that author wrote. Frankly, I just think it looks better than the WordPress built-in method, and you have a lot of options that you can do to set for fleshing out the other box. And lastly, I am a big fan of Jetpack. I know a lot of people out there don't like it, but I've never had a problem with Jetpack. Think of Jetpack as like a multi-function tool, like the Swiss Army knife of blogging. It comes with well over 20 different modules that you can enable or disable if you don't want to use them. For example, I use Jetpack to connect to WordPress.com, which is a free platform, and I like to use its visitor tracking method because it seems to target organic traffic better than Google Analytics. but Google Analytics is still important because of how deep you can dive into the data. For example, you don't get to see people's on-page time in Jetpack, but you do see it in Analytics. So I like to use both simultaneously. I use the Jetpack traffic as more of like a preliminary, hey, this is how the site's doing type of thing. But if I really want to dive deep into what people want to read most on my website, definitely go to Analytics. And Jetpack gets me the like button. I can share it with more people on WordPress.com through the WordPress reader. And it lets me enable Akismet, which is an anti-spam tool for the comment section. I mean, seriously, it has a lot of different options you can enable. It lets you do lazy load, but I don't like using lazy load from Jetpack. I would rather use it from something like Lightspeed Cache or a Toptimize. But anyway, you go through Jetpack and see all the cool little things it has. You will need a free account at WordPress.com, but if you don't want to use it, you don't necessarily have to even open it. It just needs it to connect to WordPress. Now, the only reason why I didn't bring up a caching tool is because with Green Geeks, you get the Lightspeed Cache already pre-installed and set up for you. But if you're not going to use Green Geeks and you go with a different web host, I would definitely look at a caching tool like a Toptimize. Now, caching tools are extremely helpful because they will help you streamline your website and make it load a lot faster. So you definitely want one. Unless you go with Green Geeks, then you already have one. And if you don't want to use Lightspeed, just uninstall it and add something like I love a Toptimize, but I wanted to see how Lightspeed works. Now, the problem with some of the plugins that I'm using, they haven't been updated in a few months, and I don't know if I like that idea. Older plugins are okay, but they will leave your site open to any exploits they might have from not being updated, or they can cause problems if the site is updated to a new version of like PHP. That's because some plugins will require a certain language set, and if it's no longer available in the newest version of PHP, it will break your site. It's all about compatibility, and if you're not keeping up with the newest versions of WordPress, then it's time to start looking elsewhere for the same tool. And given that there's, more than 60,000 plugins in the WordPress repository, I'm fairly sure I can find a replacement. Now, one thing that you do need to keep in mind is that you don't want to add too many plugins to WordPress. Sure, there's a lot of really cool tools out there that can polish up your site and make it look nice. Unfortunately, the more plugins you add, the slower the system gets. Just by installing these 7, I've noticed a significant difference in speed on the new blog that I just created. Don't get me wrong, it's still wicked fast, but it is taking longer and longer to go through different pages with the more plugins that are installed. So you don't want to overload your website with a ton of plugins because it will hurt your performance. Only keep the plugins that you intend to use or you absolutely want to use. Outside of these 7, I really don't see me adding more to this particular blog, depending on what I want to do with it. I might still add something like advanced ads just so I can manage the AdSense stuff and any affiliates that come through, or I might just go with Affiliate X, which does all that anyway. Plus, it gives me a bunch of tools for creating like pros and cons lists. I can create a best of list. Affiliate X is great for affiliate marketing. Unfortunately, it's one of those ones that hasn't been updated in a while, and that's kind of a bummer because it has a lot of cool features. So I'm crossing my fingers that Affiliate X updates, but if not, then I guess I'll just move on. But there you have it. That's how you install plugins and which ones I'm starting off with. I'm really excited to get started with this website. I've got everything connected now, and I guess the next stage is coming up with a content strategy. That's going to be the fun part. So what plugins would you use on your website? I think out of all the ones I mentioned, Yoast SEO is probably going to be my favorite. It's been with me through thick and thin since my days as a text broker, and it's just something I rely on. In fact, when I first installed the site and I wrote that first couple of blog posts, it threw me off not having my features from Yoast SEO at the bottom or the lights at the top. You get used to something for so long and then it's not there anymore, it throws you off. Anyway, that's going to do it for me today. Next up is going to be the content strategy. That's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to be using Mind Domo for some mind mapping. Hope you have a great day, and I'll see you next time.